Wow, Facebook, after so many technical difficulties, here we are. Sorry about this. It's now 7:42 in my time. Karlee, thanks for hanging in here with us today.
Of course.
So this is a really important and one of my most anticipated Facebook Lives because we're actually getting to talk to a real live melanoma survivor. This is something that is so important, I think, to the melanoma community everywhere. Essentially, this is something that we hope to continue. This is our very first one, so that's why technical difficulties were expected. But this is Karlee Steele. She is a melanoma survivor, and I don't want to take anything away from her telling her part of the story. So I find that your story, Karlee, is so compelling for so many reasons, not only because, you kicked melanoma's butt, but also because your mom, and, let's not forget that Mother's Day was just happened. So, this is an important part of your journey, and you are so involved in the melanoma community that, I just felt like you were the perfect person to be our inaugural survivor. So I guess just briefly, Karlee, welcome. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and briefly about, your journey through melanoma over the last, couple years, and take it away.
So let's just start by acknowledging COVID and the fact that COVID has definitely shown us grace with regards to technical difficulties, right?
Yes.
So that aside, thank you for bearing with us. For those that are still out there, 44 minutes in, but we are good to go. So let me dive into the importance and why I wanted to spend time with you all tonight. So in 2011, I was first diagnosed with a melanoma on the side of my leg, on my left quadricep. And it was a spot that I had had my whole entire life, a mole. And I had been watching it closely, and I noticed that the size and the color had changed. And so prior to our move to Austin, I went to the dermatologist because I was very used to going to the dermatologist. And they removed the melanoma. My son and I, he was 5 at the time, we moved to Austin. And when we got to Austin, my first day in my new job, the dermatologist called me at my new job, and he said, you have a stage 2B melanoma in your leg. You need to either get back home or find a new dermatologist in Austin and get this taken care of immediately, because it was a full-blown melanoma. So that was my first day on my new job in a new city with my 5-year-old at the time. And so of course I did that. I took care of that, and I found a dermatologist. We removed it, we excised it, we removed the nodes, the growing, and it all came back clear, clear margins, the whole bit. So that was great. A year and a half later, 2013, another mole appeared. So the difference in this mole that I think is important for people to know that deal with melanoma is that this mole I had not had forever and ever, like all 200 of the other ones that I have. But this mole was on my back, kind of my shoulder, right back area, and it appeared in the matter of 5 weeks. And the only reason I really truly noticed it is because when I would take off my sports bra in the morning after exercising, it would bleed. And so because of where it was located, I couldn't see it, even though I would try to, take pictures of it and whatnot. So I called my dermatologist, who I had now, 2 years under my belt with her. And I said, can we look at this? And sure enough, I went in, and it was a stage 1 melanoma. And
so at this point you're thinking like, great,
yeah.
less bad than the first one. Fabulous.
Got it. Again, got it. Let's go. So we removed that, and we, went through the excisions, clear margins, stage 1. So felt good, better about that. And then we went about our way. So, a year and a half later, 2015, that same spot, there was a swollen lymph node under my right arm. And so I thought, that's weird. Don't like that. Right. Remember, that's where the other melanoma was. It was a stage 1, kind of doubted it, wasn't really sure, but I called my dermatologist, and we went in, we decided to have a needle biopsy. And so we needle biopsied the lymph node area, and that needle biopsy came back negative. This is what's crazy. Knowing my history and knowing that I just didn't feel good about it. It was a gut feeling thing. I said to the surgeon, I said, I just want to remove it. Dermatologist said, I think we should. And we removed it. And it was when we removed it that we saw the other piece of the node, the tumor, essentially was a stage 3 B. They thought it was lymphoma or melanoma. So that part of that is so important, I think, because you have to go with your gut, and you have to be your own advocate to say, this is this doesn't feel right, this doesn't seem right, and you've got to be quick and move fast.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest, like, that was one of the most compelling things for me when I first heard your story, because I thought, you know, here, most people would just be like, great, my node was negative under needle biopsy. Like, let's just move on. And so, you know, there's a very big part of being a melanoma patient that involves advocating for yourself. And I think, you know, you epitomize that in all that you do. But, you know, had you not went with your gut and asked for the excision, you know, gosh, who knows how things may have been different.
That's right. Yeah, that's so true. So from the time we had the original measurements of the swollen node, it was a 1.1. So it was a little bit swollen.
Yeah.
And then 10 days later, it was a 2.2. By the time we had the whole section removed, it was a 4.4. So that tumor was doubling in size every 10 days. So I think that's also an important piece, because as busy mothers, as busy single working mothers, as busy human beings in this day and age, we can say, what's 10 days? I don't need to make a doctor's appointment for 10. I can wait 2 weeks. I didn't have really the luxury of waiting 2 weeks because of how quickly it was growing and spreading. And so I think that's just critical for people to hear, like, you just can't, you know, you can't put yourself on the back burner, certainly. Yeah, so that's where we were. So here I was in Austin now. So what we've now determined is that I'm reoccurring every other year, which happens to be every odd year, 2011, 13, and 15. And with what I call the big melanoma, the stage 3 melanoma, I decide pretty quickly that day that I'm going to see if I can get into MD Anderson, because of the Melanoma Center and the importance of, you know, why does this keep happening when I am doing my skin checks every 3 months? I eat incredibly healthy. I exercise and teach spin classes 4 days a week. What is going on that I can't see?
And I think that that's one thing that, you know, is also important, because we stress all the time how we think that, you know, when you have a melanoma, whether it's stage 1, stage 3, stage 4, having a person who is familiar with melanoma, who is a melanoma specialist, is so important. And there are a lot of people that are not in Texas near MD Anderson, or in Pittsburgh near, you know, the University of Pittsburgh, and that aren't near big centers, but there still are people and oncologists that do have more experience in melanoma. You know, and that's one thing that, like, AIM will offer to people, is to help them find a specialist that's nearby. And I think that, especially your story, because I found out that the lovely Nobel Prize winner that actually gave you your immunotherapy, his research and what you got actually ended up leading to the approval for Yervoy. So his work on T cells and checkpoint blockade is what led to the approval of the very first checkpoint inhibitor. So he, like, made a huge contribution to the treatments that we have now for melanoma. And you did that. You helped him. So
it was a very clear decision for us as a family at the time. We were in Austin, and I needed to get some scans done in Austin. And so we got those done quickly in Austin while I was waiting to find out about MD Anderson. And I applied to MD Anderson, you know, the night that I found out, and I got called the next day and accepted. And the reason I got accepted so quickly and I had my first appointment within 2 weeks, was because it was malignant, it was reoccurrent, and it was stage 3, B or C. We weren't sure at the time. So I got in right away. So in the meantime, in Austin, I was doing what I needed to do, scans, blood work, et cetera, to prepare for our Houston trip so we could, essentially hit the ground running. The experience in Houston, the experience here in Austin was very different than when we got to a cancer center and a research center. The prognosis here in Austin was a little bit more negative and a little bit scarier. And one of the things that stands out to me about that time 5 years ago is the oncologist that ordered the papers for me to get my scans here in Austin said to me, well, this will probably be what you'll end up doing. You'll probably do some sort of treatment, and it'll probably be, oh gosh, I'm blanking on it. Interferon, thank you.
Yeah.
And she said, but the good news is you won't lose your hair. And I remember thinking to her, I don't care about my hair. I care about my life. I have a 9-year-old. I'm a single working mama. Like I don't care if I lose my hair at all. That's
sure.
Let's work. Let's focus on my life and staying alive. And so that was a little bit scary and negative to me. And then we got to Houston, and it was like I was lifted up and carried and through those doors at MD Anderson. So whether you're at a cancer, if you're not close to a cancer specialty center or something along those lines, I still think it's important to ask as many questions as you can, get a second opinion, certainly, because you learn with the different people that you talk to. I had a notebook that I started that day and just started writing down questions. And every time I thought of something, I put it in the notebook, or every time my parents thought of something, we put it in the notebook. That way, every time we were in front of someone so knowledgeable, like that incredible team at MD Anderson, you walk out of there feeling much more confident. Their plan was, let's remove the disease entirely with surgery, and then let's focus on treatment. And so we did that, and I had a radical dissection, down the right side, and removed that. And then we did the treatment plan where they laid out the different options, and then we could choose. And I was lucky to qualify for this trial that we spoke about with regards to the immunotherapy. I was one of 25 too, which is also quite the blessing.
So I have two follow-up questions. So the first one is in regard to deciding, how do you decide to participate in a clinical trial versus something that is standard of care? How did that decision kind of sit with you?
So one of the greatest things about being at a cancer center like MD Anderson or many others around the country certainly is that you've got a team of people, right? So I had 2 oncologists, and I had a nutritionist, and I had whoever I needed. And so literally I asked my medical oncologist, I said, this is what I feel like we need to do, but what would you do? And she told me what she would do. And she said, you're on the right path. And that's exactly what I would do. And I felt so blessed to be in a research center. And I participated in all of the research trials that they needed me to participate in. So instead of giving 2 or 4 tubes of blood every time you go, I was giving 13 and 17 tubes of blood. Because I was trying to pay it forward as much as I could, even though that during that time I wasn't, technically clear of disease. So I decided with that team there, and obviously with my parents, and then one of my best friends and 2 of my best friends are actually in Houston, and she happens to be a pediatric immunologist, and so she would go with me to the meetings or to our appointments, and she would say, okay, here's the breakdown, put it into normal human being everyday language as opposed to medical terminology. And so she was super helpful to say, this is what you need to do, and this is why you got into MD Anderson, and this is why you should participate.
And AIM people, if you are listening and you don't have that person, I can be that person for you and put things into normal speak. So if you need me, you can ask me to be your person. So the other thing that I wanted to kind of get your insight about is how do you deal with this as a single mom? What do you tell your son? How much did you how did you approach this with him? And I know when we talked before, you had said that there was a service that kind of helped you. But I'm just trying to I think that's a helpful thing for other parents. Like, how do you broach this with your kids?
Right. No, that was a huge piece for me, and a huge weight off of my back once I found the resource to help me have that conversation. So let me back up that whenever you get a diagnosis call with the big C word, right, you never forget that date, that January 19th date. And it happened to be Martin Luther King that year. And my son and I were hiking, right? So we love to fly fish and we love to hike, and we've got some special spots in Austin. And so he and I were walking back from a fishing trip where we had uncovered all kinds of tadpoles and had all kinds of fun. And as we were hiking up this huge hill, my phone rings, and it was the surgeon that removed the initial tumor and lymph node. And he said, we've removed it. We have your diagnosis. It's a stage 3 lymphoma or melanoma. We're not sure, but you need to find an oncologist immediately. And he left me there as I'm walking up this hill with my son and a bucket of tadpoles. And I'm like, I have no resources. It's a miracle I even got the phone call of where we were. And I just stop, and literally the rocks are sliding out from under my feet, and he and my big red dog pull ahead of me, and I just start crying, right? And I have my sunglasses on, and he turns around and he looks at me and he said, "Why did you stop? You're never behind me. I'm always behind you." And I said, "I'm coming, I'll be right there." And I had to just fake it, pull it together, because he's 9 and I don't have the words. I don't have the words to say to him, and I don't know what's going on, so I can't. So, as we get home, I don't obviously say anything to him. I call my parents. I call my 2 best friends in Houston. They start helping me connect, right? And I start asking my questions. And one of my questions was, how do I deal with something like this? Because it's all swimming. All you hear is the word cancer, and you don't know about work. You don't know about your hair. Obviously, you don't know about your children. You just don't even know where to start. But he was my number 1 priority. So it was one of the first things I asked is, what do I do? What do I do about him? What do I say? Help me. What are the words? And so there's this service in Austin called Wonders and Worries. And because I said I have a young child and I need help, they said, then you need to call the organization Wonders and Worries. It's nonprofit, it's counseling, it's family therapy, it's one-on-one therapy with your children. And they were incredible. I got in right away. At that point, I had my plan. I had been to MD Anderson, and my son's father and his wife, the 3 of us sat down with a counselor, and he said, "Here's what's going on." And the beautiful thing was, she even talked about, our counselor even talked about how boys' brains at that age, at 9 or 10, develop differently than girls' brains. And here's the part that's developing, and here's why you need to say less. As adults,
that makes sense, right?
We overcomplicate things, and this hasn't developed, so don't do this. And he literally, walked us through, here are the things you need to say. You need to pull MD Anderson up on your iPad. You need to show him that it's a world-renowned cancer center. You need to show him your oncology team. You need to show him the logo with cancer crossed out. All of the things that I would have never thought to say. You need to say, sure, I'll be in Houston. It ended up being, on and off for a year on these dates, and we will talk, we will Facebook Live. we will FaceTime Live, and we will be connected. And fortunately, we're 2.5 hours from Houston. So again, just asking for help.
Yes.
Asking you, Melissa, asking me, asking anyone,
because these services exist everywhere, but people don't know how to ask for them. They're either, I feel like, they just don't know what to do. They want to avoid the situation because they don't want to talk to their kids. And the thing that I've been at this game now for 17 years, and in that amount of time, the worst thing that possibly can happen is to not address it at all with your kids, because, you know, positive or negative outcome, kids are really smart and they pick up on parents' cues and they know when things aren't quite right. And how would you explain where you're going, you know, every 3 weeks for your treatment? It's one of those things that the elephant in the room you can't ignore, but there are so many resources out there to help. But you have to ask.
Yeah.
And it's something that, you know, in bigger centers, that service is sometimes offered to families that have kids, but not 5 years ago. And, you know, I think, you know, the way that you helped cope with that with your son is amazing. And, you know, I don't think he would have gotten totally screwed up if you didn't do those things, but I think that it made your journey with him and you together much easier. I mean,
certainly. And for him, more confident.
Yeah.
Because when we sat down and had that conversation, it was Valentine's Day, because I was turning around and leaving for Houston that following Tuesday. And this was on a Sunday. When I said to him, I need to talk to you about someone in the family that's sick, he thought it was my grandfather. Because at the time, my grandfather was 97, 96. And so I said, no, you know, it's your mommy. But I was able to then, you know, lay it out the way they helped me. And
but you had a plan.
We literally role played it together and we had a plan. But then we also, once I was then gone, my ex-husband and his wife were incredible, because they were taking him to the therapy sessions every Tuesday. And so when I came home from Houston, and like you said, I mean, I have drains attached to the side of me, right? You can't ignore that. And so he was familiar with what drains were, and he had seen them on a dummy. He had played with them. He had learned how to clean them out. So instead of being afraid of the drains, he thought it was actually cool to clean the drains out, which I know is super gross, but for a 9-year-old,
he's a boy.
Yeah, at the time he's like, oh, I'll clean the drain. And, oh, okay, awesome. But can you imagine if he wasn't used to it or hadn't touched it or unplugged the tube?
Oh, scary.
I mean, so it was much more manageable for all of us, certainly.
So how about like the other end of it? So now, you know, you've helped your son cope with this, but now you're a mama bear who has their, you know, little bear. And how do you cope with like, okay, now I have to protect my son who now has a family history of melanoma from the son, like how both as a smaller child and now as an adult person, because I know like I have a 12-year-old, and if I was like, hey, you have to wear sunscreen every minute of every day that you go outside, she would think I was completely insane. And she does wear sunscreen. And, you know, I can tell you a funny story at another time about her, like not coming out from preschool because she didn't have sunscreen. She was inside the school during butterfly relief because she was too scared to come outside. But as a mom of who had a melanoma, and now you have this 9-year-old child, like, how do you cope with those feelings of like, oh no, like,
yeah, that's such a great question. And we've already had a scare with him, actually. So he is incredibly tuned in, thankfully, and will need to be. And we've talked about that. Regardless of where I am for the rest of your life, you have to pay attention to this. So I go every 3 months for my skin checks religiously. I have biopsies, maybe not every 3 months, but probably every 6 months. I mean, I've had 3 in the last 6 months, and excisions, right? So, so it's just something that I know, it's part of my life. It's not my story. It's just a chapter, right? And that I know I need to be vigilant about it and be my own advocate about it. So we found a spot on his ear and several years ago, and it continued to get bigger. And so I was hypersensitive to it because it was getting bigger, but he was also getting bigger. And so the spot on his ear was obviously changing. And so I obviously took him in with me, and we kept an eye on it. And after about 2 years, we decided it was time for it to come off. There was enough of a concern. And because of it was located right on the top of his ear, where it's in the sun a lot, regardless if you have the sunscreen on, hopefully he does, and ideally he does. But realistically, it's Texas. He plays football. If the sunscreen comes off, that ear is exposed. we had it biopsied, and we decided we needed to have it as clear as we could for the top of the ear, if you will. And so we went in and did a Mohs treatment and restored the top of his ear and removed it. And so he's already been through a little bit of a scare to know that this is super important. And
Sure.
he knows how vigilant I am with my appointments. And so he just goes with me every other time since I go.
Leading by example.
Absolutely. And like, he's got a spot on his foot and he's like, Mom, I know. I mean, because he knows I've been watching the spot on his foot for 2 years, and we have a picture of it, but we got to keep our baby safe.
Heck yeah, you do. But then you're also still living your life, because, you know, the fly fishing that you were doing when you found out that you had melanoma, you're still doing. Yeah. So you're living your life still, just with modifications to keep yourself safe. Right. And that's important too. Cause, you know, I can't tell you how many millions of times on a daily basis that patients will get their diagnosis of melanoma and they're like, I'm never going outside again. I'm like, that's not a realistic part of your life. Right. Like, what things do you like to do? Well, I like biking, but I'm never going to bike again. So, you know, you're a great example for people as well, that like, you deal with it and you keep on going because that's what you do. And I think that's super inspiring, to be honest.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
I think
welcome.
a lot of it is, again, I've said it a number of times, but just not only being your advocate, your own advocate, but not allowing, it can be such a mental game. When you hear those words, that you can get defeated so quickly and you can become a victim, especially when you don't know what's going on. And there's a long time when they say we're not going to have results for 10 days. You're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I have to wait another 10 days. I just waited 2 weeks for the scans, you know, or whatever. You just have to be so mentally strong. I did a ton of meditation. So there's a lot of like cancer related meditation. There's even before you go into surgery meditation. I did just a lot of quiet time. I cleaned everything out of my house. I cleaned all my junk mail out of my email. Like I totally decluttered everything so I could just focus on me. I cut sugar out of my diet. You know, under 50 grams just from fruit. I mean, I did what I needed to do, like mentally, so I could just focus on getting me well, because I have this precious angel that I,
of course,
you know, had to be healthy for.
So now we've gotten past the initial, like, you've gotten treatment, you've been clear for a period of time. And so now you've taken this diagnosis and you've become a melanoma advocate. So, I mean, the more I got lost down the wormhole of your, you know, Google search, the more you just are really throwing yourself into getting research funded. And, you know, you're just, I don't even know where to start. Like, there's so much advocacy work that you have done, but, you know, I want you to tell me, you know, briefly about that so that all the people can hear all the things and ways that you can get involved, but also, you know, you don't have to be on the Senate floor fighting for research. It can be as simple as, you know, volunteering to talk to someone that just got diagnosed, helping to be a volunteer at one of the melanoma walks, helping at the cancer center. I mean, there's so many ways to get involved. You know, not only like big and small, right? So how did you decide that you were going to take on this advocacy, you know, moving forward?
I didn't really decide, Melissa.
Oh, you didn't?
It found me somehow. And one of the first things I did, actually was an AIM melanoma walk in Houston. I guess it would have been October of 2015.
Okay.
So we created a little Team Steele, and I raised my funds that I wanted to raise. And so I just found that the more I could help and give back, the more rewarding it was, but also the more insightful it was with regards to this is why you've gone through this journey. it is so you can educate and you can inspire and you can share and you can provide hope. That's really, and that's where I am still. I mean, that was 5 years ago, and still today, when people tap me on the shoulder for a video or the Senate floor, which makes me incredibly nervous, more so than Facebook Live. No, I'm kidding. That I say yes before they even finish asking, because I just want to help, because I really look back on this and think, this is what I'm here for.
Sure.
And this is what I'm here to educate one person on, or one family on, or to give them hope, or for them to say, it's okay. I did a video for MD Anderson pretty quickly after I was stronger and better. And, from there, it led to MD Anderson saying, do you mind if we have someone that has a diagnosis similar to you, the malignant recurrent melanoma, that we can put you in touch with? And that just gave me great joy to be able to really have meaningful conversations, but to say, you know what, you're in the right spot, you're doing the right things, do this, listen to that, get this podcast, read this book, have a conversation with your son, your dog, whatever it is. And so it's just funny, because that's just continued to develop, to the point to where we were in London in 2019, and it was 2:00 in the morning, and the phone rang, and we were asleep, and it was a colleague and friend of mine that used to take my cycling class. This is how I know this guy, and he runs CPRIT here in Texas, which is the center that recruits funding for cancer research. And he said, have you heard? And I've done a lot of work with him. I've done videos with him and so forth. And I said, no, I haven't heard. And he said, why do you sound so tired? And I said, because we're in London and it's 2:00 in the morning. And he said, Dr. Allison won the Nobel Prize for Medicine for his work with immunotherapy. That's like all you. And I said, well, I'm okay. Okay, awesome, amazing. He's like my hero. And he said, when you get back to Texas, we want you to come talk about that. And so I did. We ended up doing a video. Next thing you know, after I had done some advocacy work on the Senate floor, requesting these funds and pleading for these funds and showing that these funds matter to constituents in this particular county, and that you can have survivorship, by dedicating these funds. He said to me, after I'd done all of that service at the Capitol, he said, Dr. Allison's coming to the Capitol, and he's going to be on the Capitol floor, and we're gifting this forward based on his work and what he's done, and we would like you to join him. And, of course, I know this man.
Right.
I've researched
Sure.
And
actually, he got his funding from CPRIT. So I went back and so it's just more pay forward.
100%. And so that's a lot of why I do what I do, pay forward.
Yeah.
And and so they said, can you come join him on the Senate floor and be there and be present and be, well, of course, but then you go and you meet someone like Dr. Allison. I end up, hanging out with him all morning. And I literally said to him when we first met, I said, I'm not really sure what to even say to you, because this man potentially saved my life. I haven't reoccurred since my immunotherapy, right? So that's been 6 years, which is huge compared to how I was reoccurring. But what do you say to this man? Who then says to me, he's battling a cancer and has battled a cancer. And, next thing you know, we're fast friends, and he's just a normal guy. But in my eyes, my eyes were just, glazed over, because in my eyes, he's a superhero, and he is a superhero. Right. But it's been a really wonderful opportunity.
It's a really amazing thing. And CPRIT, Sam, actually, who is one of the co-founders and is running AIM now, she's part of, she's involved with CPRIT as well. And so, it's such a huge research fund that they're doing so much good in terms of moving the research for melanoma and other malignancies that are kind of, wouldn't get this funding otherwise forward. I mean, it's a huge organization doing so much good. And the fact that you get to be part of that is amazing. But also, even just back when you were we're mentoring a person from MD Anderson, you know, AIM has a Peer Connect program too. So like, that's something that I didn't even know existed until I got involved with AIM. And so, you know, things like that, just little tiny blocks make such a huge difference in someone's life. Like, you know, had CPRIT not existed and you never met and they didn't give the money to Dr. Allison, like so many people moving forward may not have had access to drugs like your voice. So it's one of those things that like, it starts out with just a little mustard seed, like they always say, and then it turns into such a big thing. So, you know, there's no amount of help that doesn't create a bigger picture, right?
Well, and this was 10 years ago, right? When CPRIT acknowledged Dr. Allison and his work and knew he was a native Texan, and what did it require to get him back to the state? So think of what it's going to look like in 10 years from now, you know, when you think about immunotherapy and technology and medicine and what
it's amazing. Well, I'm thankful for that because now here we are, you know, we have so many drugs that have been developed in the last 6 years that we may not have ever had he not done his research. So, I think Karlee, you're such a bright ray of sunshine and the more that we read about you, the more I just love you. So there's actually going to be, and I know you know this because you interviewed and did the newsletter. In the newsletter coming up, there's a piece on you as well. And we're really hoping to do more of these survivor stories because it's important, because, you know, people come from all different walks of life and there's so many things to celebrate and to learn, you know, from each other. And I think that this is a really great opportunity to do that. And I hope 10 more years from now, we can have you back on and you can give us an update of, you know, your son and where he is and what college he's going to, for goodness sakes.
And where we're going fly fishing.
Well, and you still be fly fishing. That's right.
We all will be. Yes, for sure.
Well, I so appreciate you joining us tonight. I did really try to avoid some questions just because I wanted this to really just be about us and about you. So, you know, if anything comes up,
we need to address.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking and it doesn't look like there's anything that like we really need to do. I think you did an amazing job of kind of telling your story, and I hope everybody got to know you well tonight. You're awesome. And tell your son hello from us. Thanks for hanging in there with our technical difficulties tonight.
Of course.
And
Well, I appreciate what AIM, what the foundation does, and the fact that you take time out of your busy schedule to move these conversations forward and to have the conversations, and for people to see that have recently been diagnosed that you've got resources, lean on resources. You've got stories of survivorship, lean on those people to help you and guide you through. So thank you for your work and what you all do, certainly.
Oh my gosh.
Be happy to be here.
Yay. Well, we'll catch up soon. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.